34.
Welcome back to another Doctor Who Big Finish audio drama review. Today we'll be taking a look at a slightly different release to usual because it isn't a recent release, it is in fact one from the current 51 to 100 main range releases, and the reason why I'm reviewing this episode is because I bought it recently and I decided to listen to it. It's not a Sixth Doctor story, I know, surprise surprise, and it is on the verge of going out of stock soon, so basically I wanted to review it now in order for the people who are interested in this product to basically go and buy the physical edition before it actually sells out for good, because currently Big Finish, in case you are unaware, are getting rid of all of their physical stock of the 51 to 100 releases, and they're also getting rid of a few of the other ranges as well. I do believe a few of the non-Doctor Who ones, so basically get yourself over to the Big Finish website to grab a few bargains whilst they are still left. And what is this amazing episode, do you ask? Or you've probably seen the title of this video, and it's of course the 7th Doctor story, Live 34. Now, no doubt you've probably heard of this story before if you are a Big Finish fan, because I know it's quite looked upon by a lot of people, much like Jubilee and the Holy Terror. It's one of those episodes that is very different to your usual Doctor Who stories. So to start off with, and as per usual, in the description below, I will leave the link to go and buy this release from the Big Finish website. There is also the trailer on the website that you can listen to and download. You can also read up on this release with a rather unusual description for this story, and at the current physical price for the physical CD is £6, so it is already half price from your normal Big Finish main range releases, and I bought it in the £3 sale, so I bought it for half price of the current reduced price going on, so I got it for an absolute bargain, to be honest. And the download is currently £2.99, and for those people that are happy to get the download at any point, no matter what, even when the physical CD sells out, you can still buy the download forever, so that is a good thing. But to be honest, I'm one that likes the physical releases, as you've probably seen in my Big Finish collection video, so yeah, I'm glad to have this one in the collection. I don't have it as of yet, otherwise it will be sat here, but literally I just wanted to review this episode immediately after finishing it because it is an absolute gem. So taking a look at some of the production details for this story, it is written by James Parsons and Andrew Sterling Brown. It is directed by Gary Russell and of course stars Sylvester McCoy as the Doctor, or Resident Doctor as he is referred to in the story. We also have Sophie Aldred as Ace, as in this story, the Rebel Queen. Then we also have Philip Oliver as Hex, who is someone who I've not seen much of in Big Finish. I believe that I reviewed one story called, I think it was Alien Worlds and Worlds Apart or something like that, last year in the Big Finish main range 2-part series, so it was nice to see him again. We also have Andrew Collins as Drew Shahan, William Holland as Premier Yeager, Zahara Nagreef as Charlotte Singh, Duncan Wisby as Ryan Waring, Bryson as Gina Gremwall, and also G. Elias Rewall as Lula. And those are all people for this story. So it is a very interesting one because it is a very small cast, and I must say I actually really got used to the characters in this episode because it is almost a Doctor-like story in the classic series. The Doctor does appear in this episode, and when he does appear, it is a very amazing scene indeed at the very final act of this story. As you may know if you've listened to my Big Finish reviews of the 7th Doctor era in the past, I've always referred to as a 7th Doctor as a Doctor that is great on audio. However, I've not listened to an episode with him yet that has fully made me go, whoa, he is the Doctor, this is an absolutely amazing standout moment. However, Live 34 does something a little bit different, and it definitely gives the 7th Doctor a moment towards the very end of this episode that is absolutely stunning. He has a speech, he honestly wipes the floor with Premier Yeager in this episode. He is absolutely brilliant, and to be honest, if you're a 7th Doctor fan, I think if you are a 7th Doctor fan and a Big Finish fan, you've probably listened to this story already, but I just recommend this episode if you want to give the 7th Doctor some justice. Sophie Aldred as Ace, or the Rebel Queen as well, she is a character in this episode that is not the Ace that we are used to. She is very vulnerable in this episode. She's thrown into a situation where she is a little bit defenceless. She doesn't have all the explosives, explosives and the big bats and weaponry that she has normally in Doctor Who, so it was very different to see Sophie Aldred take on that slightly weaker role, and she was absolutely brilliant throughout the story. Once again, you don't see much of her, much like the 7th Doctor, and yeah, from what we did see of her, she was really good. Then finally for the companions, Philip Oliver as Hex, I really did enjoy him throughout this story as well. I think that he is a slightly younger version of Hex that I've seen in other episodes, or at least the other episode that I've watched. He feels a little bit younger, a little bit more like he's got things to learn. However, I feel like we got a little bit more of development with the background of his character as sort of being a paramedic in the story, and he also had a nice moment at the very end of this episode as well. I kind of feel like the companions had their own kind of pedestal to stand on and actually have their own contribution to make to the plot. Who needs the Doctor and his companions for a story when they aren't even the main protagonist? For the first time ever, from what I believe in a classic story that I reviewed, for me, the main protagonist was a character played by Andrew Collins, and it is Drew Shahan, and he is basically a newsreader on this radio station called Live 34 that broadcasts news every hour of every day, updated every minute, and it's basically an episode that is all based around him delivering the news, and that is the major thing about this story. It's not an episode where we follow the Doctor and his companions. We don't see the episode even from their perspective. Instead, it is an episode that is delivered through news bulletins on a radio station, and that makes for a very interesting listen. It's an episode of Doctor Who that I've never actually seen in this format before. I don't think there is any other Doctor Who stories that are even in this format, and it is really interesting to see this news organisation in fact broadcasting what is the equivalent of a terrorism riot that is currently going on. Every so often the Doctor pops up as a part of a political party. I think that James Parsons and Andrew Sterling Brown have honestly made an absolute gem in Doctor Who history, because this episode is a political thriller. You don't know what's going on, and every single time when you think that you're just getting on top of the plot, something else happens and it blows it out the water. This episode is a lot darker from the stories that are in new series Doctor Who, and also a lot darker than some of the episodes I've even listened to on Big Finish. It may as well be on the same lines as the Holy Terror. There is an element of this story where you see the fact that there's basically this civilization of people that are being slaughtered. Some of the people that have fell sort of victims to this organisation are in fact children, and you find out in the early half of this story that there are children that are basically assassinated and shot in the head in order to be killed to this civilization to basically go about their day-to-day lives of doing sort of driving to work, baking things, using the oven, having electricity, probably having connection to the internet, and most importantly having connection to actually be able to listen to the organisation of the radio station, being Live 34. For the early half of the story, the Doctor takes the role as resident Doctor, and he's basically the head of this political party called the FDP, and he is basically going up against Premier Jaeger as this person to be the new leader, because Premier Jaeger has been in control now for many, many years, and there is quite obviously a little bit of corruption going on. And I'm not going to go into why the corruption's going on, or the mystery behind it, or exactly the details of this story, because I don't want to ruin it for you. To be quite honest, I would like every single person after this review to go and actually buy this story from the Big Finish website, especially if you're a Big Finish listener who hasn't already actually seen this episode, because it is one of those ones that you finish and your jaw just drops. You think, wow, it is essentially, to be honest, I want this to be an award-winning episode. I think this deserves to be up there. Way back from 2005 as well. This was essentially released before I was even a Doctor Who fan. That makes me feel fairly old, and it's odd to actually think that Big Finish was releasing stuff before I was even a Doctor Who fan. They're literally just about 20 years old. So yeah, they've been pumping out quality content now for many, many years, and I think they definitely need a lot more credit than they currently get by a lot of people. But yeah, I think that Live 34 is such an interesting episode to actually have this perspective of going through the media and watching these news televising sort of programmes. We have it hopping from the news organisation to then a programme that is called Live With, and we go to an episode in part 3 where we have Live With the paramedics, and we have this person called Charlotte who is interviewing Hex as the paramedic, and we get used to his background in the story and what he has to do in order to help people. We also have a political programme filmed by Ryan Waring that is basically this interview section piece, a little bit like Newsnight, where he goes off to meet the Rebel Queen, and we find out a little bit of the truth behind 34 as a planet and a colony of the sort of humans that have travelled out into space. And we find out that the government notices that this broadcast is going on. And the result of this is definitely very shocking for Ryan Waring after the episode airs. And once again, I was very, very shocked to see how Big Finish actually handled the topic in the episode. It was superbly written, but also at the same time made you feel a little bit uncomfortable as well, which is really good for a Doctor Who story. Music and sound design for this story was in fact written by David Darlington, and the reason why I want to give credit to him is because the format of this episode has been really well devised. I think that the actual choice made by the production team behind this episode in order to make the media that the people of 34 actually get exposed to this news and information isn't a TV show, it is in fact a radio station that is broadcasting, which is a little bit unusual. Normally I expect a TV show, something like that, but to have a more obscure form of media being blended into there is really interesting to see. And also at the same time, it makes sense because this is an audio drama, and it means that they can use some absolutely brilliant skills in order to actually create the atmosphere of them broadcasting across this planet. For a start, we do not have the Doctor Who theme in this episode. I think it might be one of the only classic episodes of Doctor Who of all time, if not the only episode of classic Doctor Who of all time, to not have the Doctor Who theme tune in there. Even at the very end of the episode, when we have the cliffhanger, we don't have the Doctor Who theme. I don't quite know how an episode like this would actually work visually, because I think people would actually turn over the channel to see this episode broadcasting and they wouldn't be able to recognise it as Doctor Who, which I think every so often is something that needs to be done. I think that it is a perfect experimental episode, and the way that we have them jumping between different TV shows, even having them sort of interrupting broadcasts here and there, much like how they do with radio stations and news stations today. When something big and important happens, they interrupt programmes to in fact bring the latest information. The point of this story to be sort of brought around this political election that hasn't happened in many years, it just works so perfectly, and I think that it is in fact impossible to not listen to this story and not be intrigued as to what's going on, because I think if you're an audio drama fan, then you will automatically from the get-go be intrigued of what is going on in this civilization. Why am I hearing this? How is this a Doctor Who story? Where on earth is the Doctor? Because you feel like you're literally tuning in to an actual colony that is out there in space, and you're listening to their kind of news station, which is a really, really cool idea. William Hoyland as Premier Jaeger is an absolutely brilliant villain. As soon as you get introduced to him in the early half of this story, I think even before he is established as the main villain, you feel like he is the villain. He feels cold-blooded, he feels ruthless, and he feels like somebody that you wouldn't want to get on the wrong side of. But that said, at the same time, he is also a person that if you didn't get on the wrong side of him, he would probably kill you anyway if you are just an inconvenience to him. He's kind of like a politician character that has got to this high authority place in society. However, at the same time, he has alternative motives. He's pretty much an extremist. He has the idea of explosions. He likes killing people. And basically, he is essentially putting his own people's lives at risk in order to frame the other political party, being the FDP, of course, run by the Doctor. And there is a later moment in the story where Premier Jaeger wins the election, and the other half of the party that the Doctor is running kind of goes into disrepair, and it turns out that the main leader of that party has in fact died horrifically in a crash. The Doctor dies horrifically in a crash. Are you intrigued now? Because I was at that point. Literally, when I first heard that, it just was said as a one-off quote, said by the newsreader, said by Drew in the episode. He's just saying, other news, the president of the FDP has in fact died in a plane crash. And then you just have a moment in your head and you think, well, hang on, that's the Doctor. How does that work? And it's just everything about this episode is nothing that Doctor Who really ever contributes to the Doctor Who universe, and that is why it's just worth the listen. Go and buy it. Can't you tell that I'm enthusiastic about this one already? It's up there with the Holy Terror. If you're somebody that isn't really comfortable with violence and darkness in Doctor Who, this perhaps isn't an episode for you, because this is kind of in the period of Big Finish's history where they were being very experimental and they were kind of allowed to do what they wanted to do, which meant that we got episodes such as Jubilee, such as the horrific moments in Spare Parts, such as pretty much the majority of the Holy Terror as well. And in this episode, to give you a little bit of context, as I've already said, we've pretty much got suicide, children being shot in the head, people being burnt alive, and we also have the equivalent of corpses being left out on the street in order to rot, so sort of scavenging dogs and wolves and other people are able to feed on kind of the decomposing bodies in these slum areas of the city of 34 and kind of the other cities in the local area as well that have kind of slipped out of the political eye. So yeah, it is a dark one. And I feel like if you're somebody with a weak stomach, well, not necessarily a weak stomach because you don't see anything, obviously visually as it's an audio drama, but if you're somebody that doesn't like violence, you won't like this one. But if you're somebody that likes the Virgin New Adventures, the 7th Doctor era, the 6th Doctor era, this is pretty much probably your ideal type of story. It's such a great one, and I would love to see a new series Doctor being faced with an episode like this, even the equivalent of in series 11 or 12, seeing the 13th Doctor actually go in kind of a third-person perspective story and maybe have a whole episode delivered in newsreader documentary style things, maybe even have an episode delivered through other TV programmes, and seeing the Doctor sort of being intertwined throughout those will be quite interesting. But that said, at the same time, the unfortunate thing is I feel in this day and age people are not wanting experimental media. I feel like people don't want adventurous content anymore. They would rather be spoon-fed episodes, which is a shame because it means that episodes like this and gems like this don't happen in televised media, and it is sort of more up to the programmes such as Black Mirror in order to be the experimental ones, because you kind of go into that series not knowing what to expect. And I just loved the fact that in this episode it was so unpredictable that virtually anything could have happened, and I was physically kind of on the edge of my seat all the time. It's shocking, it's brutal, and it's a political piece, and it's also deadly, and that is really the ideal kind of Doctor Who episode for me. Overall, for the Doctor Who 7th Doctor story, Live 34, it is a very powerful piece that I highly recommend to every single person that is a regular Big Finish listener, especially if you are looking for something that is more experimental and different and unique. If you're somebody that is an experienced person in Doctor Who, the TV show itself and the reading of stuff in the comics, and also are more to grips with TV shows and science fiction that are a little bit more complex, then I would also recommend this story because it is a standout piece, as I say. However, it might daunt people that are new to listeners of Big Finish because it is completely out there and wild. So yeah, it's sort of not for everyone, but if it is your type of thing, then it is like a 10 out of 10 story. Thank you very much for watching this review. I hope you've enjoyed it, and I hope you've enjoyed kind of going back in the Big Finish catalogue and taking a look at older release. In case you are unaware, I'm kind of trying to go back to the older ones and buy all of the 6th Doctor ones before they go out of print completely. Hence why this is literally the only one that I've bought from the 51 to 100s that isn't a 6th Doctor episode. So yeah, I just bought this one on a whim because I heard it was good, and then literally the rest of my order was completely 6th Doctor related, as you've probably seen in the Big Finish collection, and if you follow me on Twitter as well. So yeah, this is kind of a one-off for me, but who knows, maybe I'll go back in the future and take a look at a few more of Big Finish's sort of catalogue treasures, and maybe even the older 6th Doctor episodes as well, such as Evelyn Smythe and the 6th Doctor. I would love to get into those a little bit more, because I've got a few sat on the shelf just out of shot that I would love to listen to at some point in the future as well. So yeah, that's that for Live 34. If you take anything from this review, buy it, and that's that. Thanks for watching. I shall see you all next time. Bye for now.
This is Live 34, 9th month, 1st day, 25th hour. The Midnight News. Our top story. An explosion has rocked the business district of First City.